All right, members. Harper?
Hold on 1 second.
Members, if we could take our seats, we're going to go back. Audience, shh. Thank you. We can go back to our business. Before we do that, though, if the clerk could please add Representative Niemer to the roll, please. With that, thank you for your patience, Representative Favre-Diaz. I apologize for this. All right, let me start over again with the final question. There being no further debate, Representative Moeller moves House Bill 5475 do pass as amended. Clerk, please call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry. Who did?
Sorry, guys.
Okay, I have the wrong person being added. We will strike adding Niemer. He is not here to this committee. Scratch all of that. Let's start over again. Thank you. There being no further debate on House Bill 5475 as amended, Representative Moeller moves that it do pass. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ammons.
Yes.
Mason. Severin.
No.
Blair Sherlock.
Yes.
Bunting.
No.
Davis. W. Deering.
No.
Dubucle. Favre-Diaz.
Yes.
Fritz. Halbrook.
No.
Harper. Meyer. Miller. Moeller. Ness. Ortiz. Rashid.
Yes.
Wilhauer. Williams A. Ryan. Oh, apologies. Johnson. Yes. Evans. Yes. Cochran. Yes. Gordon Booth. Avalar. Yes. Katzmol. Yes.
On a vote of 17 in favor and 8 opposed, and 0 voting present. House Bill 5475 is declared passed as amended and will be favorably reported to the House floor. Thank you for your patience. Next, we will hear from Representative Moeller on House Bill 3596, House Committee Amendment Number 1. While she approaches the table, I'll check on my witness slips here. While we get the witness slips, Representative Ness moves that committee do adopt Committee Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 3596. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. There are 777 proponents and 101 opponents. With the leave of the minority spokesperson, we can read those later. You want me to read them now, I'm certain. We will read them into the record later. Thank you very much. Representative Moeller, you are ready to present House Bill 3596.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today I'm presenting House Bill 3596, the Wetlands Protection Act, legislation that addresses a critical gap in environmental protections in Illinois. Wetlands are one of the most valuable natural resources we have. They absorb floodwaters, improve water quality by filtering pollutants, recharge groundwater supplies, and provide habitat for a wide range of wildlife. In fact, approximately 40% of Illinois' threatened and endangered species depend on wetlands for survival. Yet, despite this importance, Illinois has already lost the vast majority of its wetlands over time. When Illinois became a state in 1818, we had an estimated 8.2 million acres of wetlands. Today, less than 9% of those original wetlands remain. For decades, Illinois relied primarily on the federal Clean Water Act permitting program to protect wetlands from harmful dredging and filling activities. In 2023, however, the United States Supreme Court decision in Sackett versus EPA significantly narrowed the scope of waters protected under federal law. As a result, many wetlands that once had federal protections no longer do. Unlike several neighboring states, Illinois does not currently have a comprehensive state wetlands protection program to fill that gap. House Bill 3596 addresses that problem by establishing a clear state-level framework to ensure wetlands continue to be protected while providing certainty and transparency for landowners and developers. Under this legislation, no person may discharge, dredge, or fill material into a state jurisdictional wetland without first obtaining a permit from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. This bill creates procedures for individual permits while also authorizing the department to adopt general permits for categories of activities that have minimal environmental impact, allowing those projects to proceed efficiently. The bill also maintains strong coordination with existing environmental protections by requiring that the Illinois EPA certify that proposed activities will not violate state water quality standards before a permit may be issued. In addition, this legislation establishes mitigation options, including mitigation banks and in lieu fee programs, so that unavoidable wetland impacts can be offset by restoring or preserving wetlands elsewhere. Permit fees would support the administration of the program through the newly established Wetlands Protection Fund. Finally, this legislation provides transparency and accountability through reporting requirements, rulemaking authority, and opportunities for review of agency decisions. At its core, this bill is about protecting communities, protecting water quality, and protecting natural resources that provide enormous public benefits, from flood control and clean water to wildlife habitat and recreation. As climate change brings more intense and unpredictable weather patterns, the natural flood protection and water management that wetlands provide will only become more important. House Bill 3596 ensures that Illinois has the tools necessary to protect these resources for future generations while creating a predictable and balanced regulatory framework. So I would appreciate the committee's consideration. As mentioned, we filed an amendment that was adopted that would, among other measures, remove the effective date in order to give the Department of Natural Resources the ability to complete its wetlands mapping work and address fiscal concerns with the legislation. I do recognize that opposition remains from some parties. However, I am committed to continuing to work to address any concerns. And with that, I'm happy to address any questions. I do want to also state for the record that I'm committed to holding the bill on second while we continue to have those discussions with stakeholders to address some of the concerns that have been raised. And I'm also happy to introduce Paul Botts from the Wetlands Initiative and David McEllis from the Environmental and Policy Law Center, who are here to answer any questions that committee members might have. So thank you.
Thank you. If it's okay with you all, I'll go to members for their questions. Is that okay? Thank you very much. And I have a lot of hands. I'm trying to get all the names. Rep Meyer, why don't you start while I try to get all these other hands down?
Thank you. Many questions on this. You know, who's going to be in the room to determine the wetlands?
So wetlands delineation is done by any engineering firm, local firms, small firms, the same people that would test your soils when you want to build a house. Any of those outfits are eminently qualified to do a wetlands delineation for this or any other purpose.
So why is the federal government rules not good enough to follow in Illinois now then?
David McEllis, Environmental Law and Policy Center. So in the 2023 Sackett decision, the Supreme Court struck a lot of the protections for the existing wetlands protections, and then subsequent WOTUS rules that have been introduced by the current administration reduce those even further, to the extent that now only those wetlands that are contiguous with flowing bodies of water are protected. So no wetlands that are disconnected from rivers, lakes, and streams are protected under the federal WOTUS rules. That, according to the University of Illinois, removed 70% of the remaining wetlands from federal protections in Illinois. So we've taken a lot of those federal protections away. That was the regime prior to 2023.
Many of your definitions and our definitions as somebody who works the land, who natures the land to make sure that it's productive for both wildlife and everything else, are very different. And we've learned to really not trust the state of Illinois very well. When we've had it to where if we open up a ditch because of the state of Illinois hasn't kept their ditches along their roads open, our ditch that we're opening up is now draining a wetland because the state of Illinois has failed to keep their ditches open that have silted in and we can't drain our fields. Taking pooling water in a wet time and draining it, we need to have off our fields. We don't trust the state of Illinois. They failed us with their ditches. When we want to put a ditch in to drain something, we need to drain that water. You talk about permit fees. Now, if this rule goes into effect, where's the permit fees going?
The permit fees are determined by the Department of Natural Resources. They would go into the Wetlands Mitigation Fund.
Okay, so you now have a 100-acre tract of ground that you're no longer going to be able to drain. Can the mitigation fees and the permit fees go to reimburse that farmer for the crops lost on ground that he's currently farming and that he's been farming the last 20 or 30 years?
So I'm sorry, I failed to introduce myself earlier. I'm Paul Botts with the Wetlands Initiative. This bill actually specifically exempts all normal farming activity, and it specifically exempts ditches for the purpose of serving farming activity. So none of that would be affected by this bill.
So any ditches, even if mine subsidence, and we have to go deeper, we have mine subsidence going on in my district now, where we're having a terrible trouble draining ground. When we open up this Pandora's box, we will be back here every year making these restrictions worse on agriculture. You know, the city of Chicago was the biggest wetland in the state of Illinois. That's where the most marshes were in the entire state of Illinois. And you're running bills that are going to affect us with the livelihood on ground that we've farmed for generations. And I don't think we will be included in any of these negotiations because we've looked at what's going on with the clean energy. Agriculture has been locked out of those negotiations for the last 8 years. We never get to be in them. I don't trust it. I don't know what you can tell us today that's going to make us feel that it's going to be all right.
Resident Meyer, if it's okay if I go to the table for the opposition so that they can register their concerns, and it may speak to some of these issues that you're raising. And I'm not certain if all of you have submitted. I would imagine that you are, and you don't represent all the same organization. Is that correct? All right. If that's okay with the members, I'll pause on questions for a second because we do have members that want to speak to the opposition of the bill. I don't know who wants to start, but I'll turn it over to you to make your testimony.
Good evening, Chair Amons, Vice Chair Mason, Minority Speaker Severin, and committee members. My name is Todd Stroll. I'm the Assistant Director for the Department of Natural Resources, and I'm here today on behalf of the department to speak in opposition to House Bill 3596. Over the past year and a half, the department has been working to develop an updated wetland mapping and scientific baseline data to support the creation of a thoughtful, effective statewide wetlands program. This work is intended to ensure that any future regulatory framework is grounded in science, includes clear definitions and enforceable processes, and provides predictability and transparency for stakeholders. The proposed legislation, House Bill 3596, would disrupt this ongoing work and require the department to implement a program without the benefit of the data and modeling currently under development. Even though the new amendment removes the effective date, significant fiscal and staffing implications associated with implementing the program envisioned in this bill remain a top concern. Based on conservative estimates, the implementation would likely require 15 to 20 additional staff members at an estimated cost of $3.3 to $4.5 million annually in payroll and benefits alone, not including equipment, technology, vehicles, and other operational costs. If these services were to be contracted, annual costs could range from approximately $5.4 to $7 million. The department does not currently have the funding or the staffing capacity necessary to stand up this program, and these costs are not accounted for in the FY26 or proposed FY27 budget. Additionally, the proposed language does not appear to integrate with existing statute such as the Interagency Wetlands Policy Act, which would create overlapping and conflicting regulatory requirements. We also believe that it would be beneficial to understand how the federal government responds to the significant number of public comments on the Waters of the United States rules of which Illinois signed on to California's comments before establishing our own regulatory program. While IDNR supports the need for a regulatory program to protect the state's wetland areas, we are concerned that moving forward prematurely could create significant implementation challenges and lead to unnecessary fiscal impacts. We remain committed to working collaboratively with the sponsor and other stakeholders who we've been working with to develop a durable, science-based approach to the protection of wetlands that is both effective and sustainable. Due to the large number of unanswered questions, we ask that you consider holding this bill in committee. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Chris Davis, Director of State Legislation for Illinois Farm Bureau. I first want to recognize the sponsor of this legislation and the proponents for the conversations that we've had leading up to this hearing over the last couple of weeks and this morning. However, Illinois Farm Bureau does stand in strong opposition to the legislation before you today. Illinois Farm Bureau recognizes that while our country has a history of programs encouraging the conversion of wetlands and that there is now significant public interest in protecting wetlands, we agree that ecologically significant wetlands provide certain benefits, and we support reasonable efforts to discourage their conversion. However, this does not mean that private landowners should solely bear the cost of protecting wetlands. Any efforts to protect wetlands must recognize the rights of property owners. While the proponents have argued that wetlands are in danger of conversion, there are still strong federal protections in place, at least on agricultural land. Illinois must recognize that the USDA Swamp Buster program, first included in the 1985 Farm Bill, remains in effect today. Swamp Buster preserves wetlands by prohibiting any USDA program beneficiary from converting a wetland to produce agricultural commodities. Swamp Buster includes a harsh clawback penalty if a USDA program beneficiary disturbs any wetland whatsoever. They will lose eligibility for all USDA program benefits, and they must repay all past benefits, including crop insurance premiums. Proponents have stated that agriculture is exempt from this legislation. However, that is not completely true. The exemption clause in this legislation states that that exemption is consistent with Section 404F of the Clean Water Act. We know that Section 404F are specific restrictions on agricultural activities and outlines that those activities must be previous in practice and ongoing. Any attempt to change those activities are prohibited. This significantly handcuffs a farmer's ability to adapt to changing conditions, market environments, and make necessary changes to their farming practices. This legislation relies on one single condition to determine a wetland: soil capable of supporting vegetation. A definition of a wetland should require all three benchmarks of hydric soil, hydrophotic vegetation, and standing water for a predominance of the year supported by at least 3 years of consecutive sampling. This legislation would regulate what is known as an isolated wetland that has no connection to waters of the United States or waters of the state. That was never intended to be regulated by the Clean Water Act. Farm Bureau policy supports a mapping program that is a prerequisite to any legislation or regulation. You've heard that IDNR is currently performing a mapping study. IDNR should be allowed to complete their study, and the data that the department has utilized to determine the universe of potential wetlands should be readily available for public review, especially by any impacted landowners. IFB strongly supports the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Partners Program and NRCS voluntary wetland and habitat restoration programs. These programs restore wetlands on private lands through financial and technical assistance. They are voluntary and incentive-based. The Fish and Wildlife Services Partners Program has supported 123 projects and restored over 2,000 acres of wetlands in Illinois. via $1.9 million private funding investment, including funding from the Illinois Farm Bureau. Various NRCS programs have restored over 21,000 acres in Illinois via $96 million federal funding investment. In Illinois, over the last 15 years, we have a net increase in wetlands on agricultural land. And finally, I will leave you with a story. In 2019, Illinois Farm Bureau member Kurt Wilkie won a 9-year legal battle against the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service after they wrongfully classified 22 acres of his farm as a wetland. 9 years. Despite having firm documentation that the land was not a wetland, NRCS used a single undated aerial photograph to delineate 22 of the acres as a wetland. Despite Wilkie winning 4 different times over 9 years, NRCS forced multiple repeated appeals, which the National Appeals Division ruled in Wilkie's favor. Each time, rather than appeal the appeal decision, NRCS simply issued a new delineation and made him go through the process over and over and over again. Finally, on the 4th time, Wilkie asked, on the record, how NRCS can continue to do this. NRCS officially testified, again on the record, that if you would have just accepted their determination, he wouldn't have had to go through it. That is why Illinois Farm Bureau stands opposed to this legislation. There must be stronger guidelines in place.
Thank you. We have.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Josh Witkowski, representing the Illinois Federation for Outdoor Resources. Want to say thank you to the bill sponsors for what they are trying to do. As hunters, fishers, trappers, we very much believe in conservation of the land. However, there are still some concerns here that we look forward to working on. You just heard IDNR state that this would cost somewhere between $3.3 and $7 million to stand up, which means that IDNR would have to structure permit fees to cover that. We are concerned that nonprofit hunting and outdoor groups that currently maintain wetlands would be discouraged from doing so on the structure of those fees and how much they may end up being. So this bill has the potential to actually discourage wetland maintenance and wetland development. Additionally, there are some concerns with the definitions as they're used in the bill. The definition of navigable water, which affects which wetlands are determined to be covered, states in part if the water was historically navigable or susceptible to future use. So that now leaves you guessing whether or not at one point in time in human history, whether or not a navigable water was on your property when you're looking at these permit systems, or whether there may be one in the future. Additionally, there's a designation for Class 1 wetlands that says if the wetland had been a suitable habitat for threatened or endangered species. Well, all wetlands meets that requirement. So now you're inadvertently classifying all wetlands as Class 1 under this bill. Additionally, there are mitigation ratios that are specified on numerous different pages that do not match the Army Corps of Engineers standard for mitigation ratio, which is 3-to-1. So now you're creating a definite state standard that goes against what federal standard is, which could be an issue. Another issue in here is that if the wetlands becomes disturbed due to utilities or anything else going on, or more particularly in our instance, if a response is due to imminent threat to a person, it requires an after-the-fact compensation that you have to pay to the department. So if you end up caught in a sinkhole, you end up in a life-threatening event, heart attack, something like that, and rescue vehicle has to come get you, you then get stuck with a bill of undeterminate size based on how this bill is written. That's a problem for us. Another issue, or the final issue that we have, the department's failure to act constitutes denial without prejudice, and you start the process all over again. So you can spend 80 days waiting and then have to start the process all over again simply because the department did not have the resources to act on your request for permit. So that can leave projects laying in limbo for unknown amounts of time. that's an issue given that construction for this really is only good for about 6 months of the year. So those are the issues that Illinois Federation of Outdoor Resources have identified with the bill. We look forward to working with the bill sponsors to try to address some of those. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Donovan Griffith. I'm Executive Vice President of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. We are here today in opposition of the bill. Out of respect for the hour and to ensure I'm not being repetitious, I'll be very brief. But we do have serious concerns with the bill as it's currently drafted. As was somewhat noted, the bill carries a very broad definition of wetlands. It could potentially bring in almost any non-designated body of water. It also gives authority to DNR to define what constitutes as a state jurisdictional wetland through rulemaking. So without a definition, we aren't really sure what we're regulating at this point. And to the point of IDNR, as was stated, they are currently undertaking a comprehensive GIS mapping effort being done by the Prairie Research Institute, and then being compared to the data from the Army Corps of Engineers to identify what wetlands we have here in Illinois. I believe that advancing a regulatory framework while the state is also trying to determine what, where, and any type of determination of what wetlands we have in the state is a little bit of putting the cart before the horse. And we shouldn't be passing regulations while the state's currently and actively trying to determine where these wetlands are. And then third, and sticking with DNR, funding for the program through DNR is really uncertain. The bill establishes a wetland protection fund that is mostly funded through penalties and future appropriations from all of you, and then also allows them to do a permit fee, which would be set in by rule. There is no upfront funding. There is no long-term dedicated funding. And so that we believe that there's also then no timeline for when DNR could get this program up and running. And then when they do get it up and running, understanding DNR's capacity to manage such a program, especially with so many unknowns around what a wetland is and what that type of permitting program would look like since it is currently unknown, would be problematic. A lot of other reasons, I think they've already been covered, so in my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Moeller, would you like to redress any of those questions that have been raised here on the panel, or you want me to go back to member questions at this time?
I'm happy to go to questions, and then we can address the questions as they come. And I'm sure some of the questions that are going to come from some of my colleagues will reflect some of the concerns that were raised here, and we can address both at the same time.
Thank you. I'll go back to Representative Bunton, who was on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Todd, I hate to call you back to a microphone, but we're going to need to do so here. So walk me through the process that you guys are currently working on at IDNR with the mapping program. How much longer is that mapping program going to take to kind of figure out where we're at across the state?
Thank you for that question. As it was noted, this research is being done with the Prairie Research Institute. And it's been going on now for several months. At this moment, it's a deep learning AI modeling program that's running right now. They're running it on 16 counties right now. We're expecting that to be finished in a few weeks. And then they're going to take the information from that and make some corrections or adjustments and do the rest of the state. When they press go on the second part of that, it's going to be another 5 or 6 weeks of running that model through the supercomputers. So we're looking at probably sometime about the end of May to have it completed. And that's just the model. Then we would need to look at the results and what is it telling us and how does it inform the number of wetland applications that we might anticipate, and that would help inform what we should charge for that to make this a sustainable program and on down the line. How many staff do we need to run that program? So that's where we are. It's probably end of May, and then analyzing the results.
Can you explain to me you said 16 out of the 102 counties. How did you come to those 16 counties? Is that going to be the most affected areas, or what are your thoughts?
It was actually the areas of the state where we had the most kind of robust information to inform the model. So it's a learning model. So you need good delineated wetlands to teach the model. And those 16 counties were the ones where we had the most robust information. They were kind of mostly in the northern third of the state.
So I guess my question may be to the representative now. Are we willing to wait to see what this mapping program, the results of these mapping things from IDNR? I mean, when you talk about the implementation of this is going to be through the IDNR, and then when they are in opposition of this bill, I think we need to have a conversation. So what are our plans moving forward here? Are we going to wait for the mapping to see where we're at, or what's up?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we're trying to address the concerns that have been presented to us from IDNR, and the process that they're going through right now. The need for, planning for implementation and all of that. That's why we took the effective date out of the bill. So should this bill pass the House and Senate, be signed by the governor, there is no mandate that IDNR implement the bill once the bill is signed. There would be a rulemaking process, and that is specified in the legislation. And as we know, rulemaking takes time, going through the JCAR process and whatnot. And that would be IDNR working in concert with advocacy groups and stakeholders in developing those rules. So certainly we know that the expectation that this would be implemented, anytime within the next year is unrealistic. And I do want to kind of remind, and I know we see a lot of legislation come through this committee. This is the second year that we have brought this bill forward, and we did not move this bill it moved out of committee, but we did not advance it on the floor, again, because of the concerns that we heard from IDNR. So it's been another year that we've given the agency the time to contemplate implementation and what this would mean for them. And so because of we want to be mindful and respectful for the process that they need to go through, but also recognizing that, again, we're on the brink of losing almost all wetlands in the state of Illinois, with less than 10% that are left. And we don't want to take too long before we act to protect them. So that's why we keep bringing this bill back. We've brought this bill back again.
So you say you are down to 9% now, and you're threatening to lose more. How are you going to lose more?
Well, just through the course of development. And as a reminder, and these are the regulations that we're talking about in this bill are mirrored on the regulations that were at the federal level before the Sackett decision. So these are not new regulations that were dreamed up by the advocates and are being proposed for IDNR. These are regulations that landowners have had to comply with for over 5 decades. And because of the Sackett decision, those regulations are no longer in place. And just for those who may not have read, closely on the bill, which is understandable, we currently have counties that have their own ordinances and regulations in place. So this bill does, counties are currently regulating wetlands in the collar counties, within Cook County, the city of Chicago. And those regulations have been in place, for decades as well. And those agencies have been able to manage that regulation through their county structures. And so, again, don't feel that this is necessarily an overly burdensome request for the Department of Natural Resources to oversee.
What is the process of taking land out of wetland? What is the process for a producer or a advocacy group to take wetlands out of the designation?
I'll send it over to Paul.
I mean, I guess
I'm not
that's
sure I
a bad,
understand the
I'm sorry,
question.
that's a bad way to ask that question. So you say we have dropped down to 9% wetlands here in the state of Illinois. What were we at one time? What was our highest?
Oh, well, it was tens of millions of acres originally, or by originally we mean 200 or 300 years ago. And we know this now because wetland science has advanced a great deal. And one of the ways that we can, that we delineate wetlands now is by testing for what are called hydric soils. So a wetland is not just an area that got wet. Last week's storms and so forth didn't create any wetlands all by themselves. A wetland is an area that has been wet regularly for a very long time, long enough for plants, animals, insects, even microbes, and even the soil itself to have been gradually changed by the regular presence of the wet conditions. So we're talking centuries here to create a wetland. And since not just, the U of I scientists, but even, local engineers, it's a very simple test. They test for hydric soils, and we know from that actually tens of millions of acres of the vast, flat, tall grass region, which of course is most of our state, was originally wetland. And so we know now more definitively than we used to how much of a fraction of wetlands we have consumed.
So at the end of the day, say we have a huge weather event outside right now, and we haven't seen it for quite some time, but to say that we were, and I've got a poorly drained farm that I am producing a crop on. Regulation comes in, sees that water. When we're doing the mapping program, if we're continuing to be wet all the time, am I at risk at my farm with all of that moisture to be designated as a wetland?
Let me do a point of order right quick. I have several members, Representative Bunting, asking for recognition, and we do have another bill after this bill to do. So, and I'm going to hold this bill on second, regardless to what happens here. So I want you to know that you'll have another opportunity to ask additional questions after these folks get together. So we don't have to do it all tonight.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. We can talk more about this,
Sure.
Representative Bunting,
Absolutely.
and we have
Absolutely.
met. The answer is no. A rain event is not going to turn a piece of ground into a wetland. And I know this because at my organization, I'm the one who takes the phone calls, and I take them from people actually who love wetlands and wish there were more wetlands. And those folks call up after rainstorms, and they are convinced that the vacant lot next door is now a wetland. I've taken this call probably 12 times in the last 10 years. And we always have to explain to them, no, that didn't make a wetland. That's not how wetlands get made. Wetlands require a great deal of time, as evidenced by long, slow changes in what's in that piece of ground. So no, your ditch being filled up by last week's rainstorm didn't make it a wetland. I regret that many people believe this and think they've been told this, including by authoritative people, but it is not, as a matter of law or science, the correct answer.
Okay, and I will close. Thank you, Madam Chair. I truly urge you to hold on this bill here. Let's get this mapping process done. Let's give IDNR the opportunity to get what they need to get done, get their head around this. You had started off with the fiscal impact. You know it's going to be high. Let's pay close attention to what goes here with IDNR. And when it comes to the stakeholders in this conversation, I sure hope agriculture is a major stakeholder in it. Thank you. Appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Let me do some housekeeping. I have a letter from Speaker Welch replacing our permanent member, Representative Jimenez, with temporary member, Representative West. Thank you. Next, I have Representative Deering. Again, I'll ask the members of the committee to respect the time and the hour and the other members of the committee with your questions and be direct and do not duplicate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have many questions, but I will be brief, so I'll just make a couple points. One, and most importantly, you simply said it's been held all the way through last year to this year, and should it received passage in the House and the Senate and the governor signs it, there is no mandated implementation. So in my mind, this is not what we're here for as far as changing policy. In hearing the multitude of opponents and their very lengthy opposition, I just strongly would encourage this committee not to move this bill here today until their concerns are addressed. We just cheered on a bill that saved DNR $150,000 a year, and now we're looking at, you know, fees and costs, I'm sure, much larger than that. So it seems a little counterproductive. And lastly, you said that there are a number of local counties and municipalities that are in fact doing this work. So I'm always in favor of local control. So I will be a no.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ness?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious and want to look out at the audience. How many of you are here because of this bill, in support of this bill? Do we have people? Yeah. I thought so. You've stayed with this a long time. Thank you for being here. I get calls about this. I've talked to many constituents. People want us to do something. The problem is when it comes to things like water, we can't reverse it down the road if we don't do certain things now to protect it. So I get that there's complications. I'm glad the state's moving forward with the mapping process. I think I live in a county where we've done some of this. We don't build on rechargeable aquifers, which is great. Why would we build on rechargeable aquifers? But that's not the way it works everywhere. And so I think it's really important that we keep moving this forward. And I'll close with this. We know around here that if we don't keep these conversations front and center and bring all of you opposing and supporting to the table to talk about this, it won't happen. And we want to keep the pressure on. And so I'm just looking at all the people that are here. Thank you for showing up tonight and sticking it out with us. I support us moving forward to continue to protect our wetlands. So thank you.
Thank you. My last speaker on here is Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, I know this has been a little bit of a belabored topic, so I'm just going to dive right in on a couple of these things. My first question is, you know, you've had, obviously, there's a lot in support, but definitely a lot of groups opposed. Specifically, have you had conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers on this particular issue?
Yeah, so we've had some brief conversations previously with some of the Army Corps of Engineers districts. There's multiple Army Corps districts that cover the state, but only briefly on that topic.
Well, the reason being is because the bill as written requires IDNR to work with the Army Corps on a joint permitting process. And I guess the question I want to know is, have you had the conversations with them? Is this something that they are willing to do and or able to do?
Without the, I will look at the language, but I believe it allows them to operate on a joint permit program. And I think there are some states that do that or that have taken over the full responsibility of a wetlands permitting program. But I believe that we left that open that they could do that. But
well, I hope there's some conversations because I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me, I guess. Let's talk about other state agencies. Have you, obviously, the Department of Natural Resources in opposition. What about other agencies, IDOT, IEPA? Have you had conversations with them with regards to this?
We had conversations with IEPA in previous iterations of the bill and took their comments into consideration. However, we did just recently hear from IEPA that they had some requests in there as well, so that they will be part of that.
Is that related to the fiscal impacts that the Department of Natural Resources?
It is related to what potential staffing issues they might have to deal with some of the water quality certifications that go along with this. We have not talked to or heard from IDOT on this topic. But there is the Interagency Wetlands Protection Act, and that covers some of those road projects that are run by IDOT, but we have not specifically heard from them.
Okay. I guess what do you envision, what's the funding source that's going to be the ability to implement this program?
So over time, the program will be funded through the permit fees that are outlined in the Wetland Protection Fund.
That's a good thought over time, but initially.
And the initial would come from, our budget, so. And again, this is why we have left the implementation and effective date out of this bill and filed the House Committee Amendment number 1 in recognition of the fact that we will have to budget for this in a future budget.
Okay.
But this is what we do at the state. We have to pay for staffing in all activities that we, provide for all the services and programs and regulations that we are part of our state government. And wetlands have a high value, as we've been talking about, and there's a public benefit, an enormous public benefit to protecting them. And so that's what's, this bill argues that's worth the cost to the state, to protecting these wetlands that will be eradicated if we don't.
The state's in the process of, through the Department of Natural Resources, of going over and mapping these sites out. I mean, again, you say that there's the implementation dates pushed out, which I would get is, I guess, an upside. But the issue with that becomes, what about the conflicts in the report? If, the idea behind a study or things of that nature is to be able to take in data that we are then, as legislators, have the ability to push out good public policy behind. If we're not waiting for that data, I mean, we aren't pushing out the best public policy that we can. I mean, how do you assume that we're going to be able to take the facts of that report and implement them if they conflict with the mandates that are stated within this piece of legislation?
It's my understanding, and unless IDNR wants to provide additional information, the report, the work that they're doing right now is simply mapping the location of the wetlands and the quality of the wetlands, the categories. We know there are wetlands in Illinois that are unprotected because of the Sackett decision. Unless IDNR feels that there aren't wetlands that are left unregulated, unprotected, I think we can all agree that there are. The data that's going to come back is the number and location and quality of those wetlands. So
okay.
that is not in conflict with what we're trying to do with this bill.
All right, final question then with regard to that is, we talked about the funding, and you had stated that funding for this would come out of the budget. What dollar amount are you anticipating is going to be in this FY27 budget in order to implement a startup?
Again, this is the House Committee Amendment number 1 removes the effective date. And we know that this is going to have to go through a rulemaking process, which can oftentimes take up to a year, 2 years. So this will impact future budgets, but it does not impact FY27.
But you don't have a specified dollar amount that would be necessary in order to...
And that's going to be part of the rulemaking process. It's going to be part of the mapping results that come back from IDNR. IDNR has provided you with their estimate on what they think the program would cost, and that was what, $3 to $4.5 million?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, earlier you had said you were going to the opposition and you were coming back to Representative Meyer, so I believe he had some follow-up that was missed.
Actually, no, I was going to the rest of my list when I said I was coming back, so I will not come back at this time. At this point, because Representative Moeller has already committed to bringing this bill back, this bill is not finished. We are clear on that. There's some conversation that you all are still having with IDNR, the department, and other stakeholders. I'm going to move the action on the bill at this point and complete our questions today, but we'll be back again to speak with you all on this bill. With that, There being no further debate, Representative Blair Sherlock moves that House Bill 3596 do pass as amended. Is there leave? We want a roll call. Thank you very much. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ammons,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes.
Severin,
No.
Blair Sherlock. Bunting,
No.
Davis W. Deering. Dubucle. Favor Diaz. Fritz. Halbrook.
No.
Harper. Meyer. Miller. Moeller. Ness. Ortiz. Rashid.
Yes.
Wilhauer. Williams. A.
Yes, and what a long time coming. Congratulations, and please add me to the bill.
Johnson. Evans. Cochran. Gordon Booth. Avalar. Katzmol. West.
Thank you. There being 16 members in favor, 8 opposed, and 0 voting present, House Bill 3596 is declared passed as amended and will come back to committee. It will be a hold on second. It will be favorably reported to the House floor. And now our final bill. We have one final bill left, which is House Bill 4941. Representative Mason